you open Beegraphy, so this is what you see. You'll see an editor, marketplace, and all the other tools. What you need to do first is log in. For most of you who are first-time users, you'll be signing up, and once that is done, we can get going. So what I'll do is I'll head to Beegraphy, and then I'll go through the process so you'll all follow it. Yeah, we go to beegraphy.com. Like I mentioned, you see the editor, you have the market, and then I've already logged in. So just fill in your info, and then you're good to go. All the required information here. You have support, you have the guide, all the editor, any questions you can ask the team. Head to the editor first. So this is what you see in the editor. Once you sign up, yep, get back. So this is the workspace home. This is what you see when you sign up and go into the editor. You have the profile on top. This is where you can add your images, add more information. You have your models. All the models that you work on will be here. Some of the assets, some fonts that you can upload, images that you can upload, which later you can utilize in your scripts, can be uploaded here. Another key feature that I mentioned earlier is creating of team. So you can create a team and give access to each of your team members and decide who's working on which project, etc. And finally, creating a new model. So this is what we'll do. So let's head back to Beegraphy once again. So yeah, we have, you can access the market from here. You can develop your portfolio, your account details, you can change your password, all that, image, add your image, set up your profile. You can add favorites for quick access to your models. You can check the models that has been shared with you by other users. And if you have already published a few on the market, you can access from there. Now, if you want to create a team, give a team name, and then you can give yep. And then when you add projects, you can have it there. Now let's start a new project and get into the editor interface where all the magic happens. So let's create a new model, workshop 1A. Delete them. Yes. So this is the interface that you'll get once you sign in to Beegraphy. You'll have most of your tools here. This is your 3D viewer. Now you don't have to go elsewhere. All whatever you develop will be seen here. You can set up different view styles, view modes, zoom in and out, create. This is where you for script, you add your components and develop script. People who are familiar with other parametric tools, I think they'll be easier. It'll be way easier for them to grasp. Quite intuitive. This is where you add the components, and this is where you see the model getting developed slowly. Here you can see how many people are working on the file. So currently it's just one. If you have multiple people part of your team at the same time, they'll show up here. You can have some comments and you have a few other user zone related functionalities. Heading back to Beegraphy again, we can just go through the same things in more detail. Click this, you'll go back to your home that we saw earlier, just to view all the models. You have some Q core components. If you want to export, you can come here and add some material. Most of the tools that is available on Beegraphy, you would be able to find it here. Surface, vector, transform, curves, all these tools are here. If you want some math operations, those are available, the list. So this is your main friend. Try creating something simple so that we can see something on the viewport. Okay, so as soon as you create, you have it in your 3D viewer. Zoom in and also make it full screen. Quite cool if you want to detail look at the model. And also change views from perspective, top view, front, right, easy. And if you have, then add ground plane. That's also quite possible, easy to use. Now, when it comes to the user zone, we have the number of users here. We have some comment section here. So if you have your teams involved and you have multiple comments that's been added, you can view them from here. And then you have these two different modes. We'll get into these later on, where you can demo the output of how it looks like. So this is about the basic interface of the key components on your landing editor page. Now let's look into nodes, parameters, and constraints. So you'll need to understand this for having a better computational thinking. Yeah. Now, when you double click, you saw a lot of comments, a lot of components or nodes, and we opened up a box and you found this. Right now, we need to know what this actually means, what each of these icons mean. So let's go into these. So nodes. So the one that we opened up, most of it are called nodes. So fundamental unit of parametric design system that performs a specific function or operation. Like that's what nodes are. And these represent actions, processes, any component, any function that you want to introduce. Those are called nodes. Now, every node has different components to it. You have the name, icon. These are the inputs. These are specific inputs. You'll have input values and you have the output. So these are what each node component you'll see. These are elements. Now you'll find these four different node states. If you have a node which is normal, this is how it looks like. If you select the node, you'll have these yellow outlines around it. If you have hidden a particular node, you'll find these diagonal hatches. And if there is any error with what you've done or the type of node that you have introduced, they'll show in red. Whenever you work on these scripts, it's always about a matter of input and output, right? So this is the output coming from one of the node to another node to its input. So this is how you keep working and building up the script and your logic. Now, when you've done it correctly, this is how will come. And if you think about how the data is flowing, so you're building a circle, and the circle requires an input, which is a point and radius. And what you've provided, you've constructed a point here, and you've given the output of the point and provided to the input of the circle. Therefore, it's correct. But when you try to do something which does not make sense, say in the case of extruding a curve, it is asking for a curve, but what you're providing is a surface, right? So then it shows error and thus red. You can add multiple inputs as well into. So if you have a circle and you want three circles of different radius, this is how you can do. You can create three different values, and then you can input all of them into one node. And the same thing goes for output. So if you have a curve and you want different things to happen to each of those curves, you can have multiple outputs connected to the node as well. And if you've done everything correctly, you'll start seeing things on the 3D viewer. Cool. Now we've discussed about the nodes, and most of the things fall under two categories when you're developing a parametric model. One are all the parameters, and then you have constraints. So parameters are the main foundations of parametric design. So this is what gives it the strength, the flexibility to manipulate the models and make it adaptable. Constraints are what make sure that the structure doesn't violate, or your script doesn't violate certain design principles. For example, if you have a setback which is fixed, it's better you provide it as a constraint, and therefore you could approach it like this. In Beegraphy, you have something called a range input. So what range input is, it provides numbers between a range. And this makes it flexible so you can move around within that range, right? There is another component called number constant, which provides a constant number, which you can edit it by changing the number, but it doesn't change as a variable. So in the case of any information or data that you want to keep it variable for a user or yourself, you provide a range input, but any data that you want to be fixed, you can keep it as a number constant, right? For example, if you're doing something where you have speed of light or acceleration due to gravity or something that you want to be constant, pi, for example, you add it as a number constant. An easy comparison would be if you are creating a rectangle, you can create it in both ways. It would still work. One, you can create it as a range input, give a number between 1 to 100, and you can keep it both width and length as a range input, or you can make both constant, right? These are ways you can develop a script. You could also do it hand in hand. So if you have width that wants to be more flexible and length to be a constraint, that's also possible. So if you have a barrier on one side, you keep that side as a fixed, and then you move around. So it's more about how you develop based on the requirements. Now let's head to the Beegraphy platform and develop the same. delete this one. There you see. So now you can see a rectangle. Now Beegraphy has provided width is 20 and length is 10 by default. Now what we need is to position the rectangle first. So we need a point, construct a point, provide it to the rectangle.
Cephas, maybe
Yes.
change the viewports to the shaded mode.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe
Yeah.
turn on the grid. Yeah, look better. Thanks.
All right. Cool. So there were a few things that we discussed earlier. Those were parameters, variables, or constraints. Now let's add a range input as one of the variables, right? Now every point that you want to define on a 3D space requires a value on the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis, and this is what will create. Now, if you hit the drop down, you can give the range. Let's say minimum 0, maximum 10. You can hit Control C, Control V, paste this 3 times, and then make the connections. So right now, the location of the point is at the origin because you've given 0, 0, 0. And the rectangle is starting from that corner. Now, if you keep changing the location of those points, the rectangle also starts to change. Cool. And that's what you do with the rectangle as well. Now you have width and length. We'll try to keep a constraint for width. You can constant number. Okay. And then we can have length as a parameter. And therefore you use range input. I'm keeping 0 to 100 so that you can see the variations much more. So that's how you do it. So you have this as a constant. This you don't really want to move. So you can have that as constant. You can also have that width as well as the range input, and you can constantly move around. So this is in the case of a rectangle. You can also see the same concept work again if it comes to like a box where you have three. So now you're creating 3D geometry out of it. So you have width, length, and height. If you have a form whose height needs to be restricted, you keep that as a constraint and then play around with the width and length. So this was a quick demo into, let's say, nodes, parameters, and constraints. And yes, thank you for listening. So this is just the first module, like an introduction to parametric design and a very intro basics part 1. to Beegraphy. We'll dive into the topic deeper as we go ahead in our workshop schedule. So yeah, so I think if you guys have any questions, please write it in the chat about what we've just seen so far. Sure, we'll be looking into it more in the upcoming sessions. Yeah, and then yeah, we can break for 10 minutes and then come back again. Yeah, learning. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
Sounds good.
that sounds good. Probably a 10-minute break will help. So the time is different for everyone. Like 10 past whatever hour you have, you all have. Um, Cephas,
Yeah,
just one quick question. I guess you know that we have what do you call it? Shortcuts, like for the
yeah,
number on the range input. You
yeah,
intend
yeah,
to avoid it. Okay,
yeah.
just to make sure.
Okay, all right. So I was just trying to get them through the basics because a lot of people contacted us who would not only new to the tool but new to the whole parametric design concept itself. So that's
Mhm.
why I was thinking like because we have resources and we'll be taking all of them through this slowly and slowly.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay, then let's take a break. Unless anybody has any question.